Hello, and welcome once again to the Mind series. I'm Dr. Ryan Thompson, CEO and Medical Director of Mind Matters Clinic, and with me this evening is Marnie Dick, board-certified behavior analyst, and tonight's we'll be going through two different subjects. We'll be focusing on autism and the behavior analyst. In the first segment of our show, we'll be talking about what are the challenging behaviors of a child with autism and how is it a behavior analyst might help in the second segment. So first, for people that aren't really familiar with autism and perhaps why a behavior analyst would ever be necessary for a child with autism, I'd like to describe autism. Not everybody who has heard of autism knows how it works. So a child with autism oftentimes has difficulty in perceiving their world or understanding the world the way an ordinary individual might. And by the same token, then parents who are working with children with autism don't always realize that the way they see the world and understand the world is different. So children with autism oftentimes appear to be absorbed in their own world, where they tend not to interact with other people. They're described as having parallel play, which means playing alongside other kids or other individuals and not engaging with them. And when they do engage with other individuals, can be in peculiar ways which aren't readily apparent why it's happening. And so it presents a unique set of challenges for parents and the individuals and educators, anybody else that comes in contact with a child with autism, to know how to interact with them, what to expect from them, and then if you want to improve their behavior so that they can be successful socially, then it's a matter of saying, okay, how can we help those individuals to integrate and be successful more in society and within the family dynamic. So autism by itself tends to be basic things of difficulty with social interactions, focusing on certain areas of interest, where they become very focused or very interested in very narrow areas. They tend to have areas where they will continue to do the same things over and over again. They're called rituals. Will tend to be focused on certain activities or factual information on things, and they don't tend to communicate well. So it's a difficulty with both verbal and nonverbal communication, which again impacts their ability to be social, to understand how they're impacting people around them. So basically I'd like to go through first and ask Marnie, who's our guest this evening, a lot of kids with difficult behaviors, I mean, a lot of parents would say, yes, my child has difficult behaviors, but what is it that makes a child with autism unique for that parent in trying to parent them and trying to figure out what to do with their behaviors?
What makes an autistic child unique compared to there's so many traits, there's so many different things, and each autistic child is unique in himself. So now if we mention some of the traits here of what an autistic kid looks like, doesn't mean that necessarily your child is going to have all of those traits. So some of the things is the nonverbal and isolating self, wanting to only play with himself, a lot of OCD behaviors, lining things up. If you try and change your schedule or their schedule in their day, that's a problem. So is that kind of
It does. Now, when you describe an OCD behavior, what kind of behaviors might you see that would be an OCD behavior?
So some of the things that I've ran into with OCD behaviors is all the doors have to be closed, maybe the chairs have to be lined up. Right now I have a kid that likes to have all the dinosaurs in a certain position with their heads facing a certain way. And so and it's constant. So if it looks like it's moving and it's not, they will go in and rearrange it and make sure and keep checking that things are, or books are in a certain order, or cars are in a certain order. Also, what can happen is you buy them toys or gifts and they won't unwrap them. They'll keep them in the box and just put the box up, and so they don't necessarily want to play with all of their toys. They just want to see them all, lined up.
So, Sam, the parent, and I buy my child that toy. This wonderful toy, it's in a package. I'm so excited to have him play with that toy. And he sets it up on the shelf. He hasn't opened it yet. And I look at it and go, well, that's kind of silly. We should open the gift. So I open the gift in his presence. What would happen?
You would experience a huge amount of dissatisfaction from that child. And so they will probably scream, and they'll probably stop you in the midst. They're going to try their best not to allow that to happen. So if you go and try and open it up, they're going to grab it from you. They might hit you no, don't open it. And so you're going to run into a lot of
So how might a
behaviors.
parent interpret that? Because if I look at that, I'd think, well, that's just a parent helping out and opening a gift, and the child's acting in a way which seems really irrational, right? So
Right.
how would a parent might interpret that, and what is it that they need to learn from that experience?
They need to interpret it, well, if their kid was diagnosed as autistic, they need to know, okay, that's going to be one of the characteristics that I need to work on with them. And what was the other question?
No, how might they interpret that differently than what they're seeing?
Oh, well, it's going to be part of the characteristic that they're going to be that they're going to have to understand about their autistic child, and to be able to say, okay, I'm going to put it back, we're all good, and then we can work on, slowly them actually playing with their toys through time. So.
Okay. Now, a lot of kids with autism are able to do things in public which would embarrass a parent. We talked about this before the show started, saying, okay, what if I pick my nose? I'm picking my nose, I'm sitting in class and I'm picking my nose, and I'm autistic, and somehow that doesn't bother me. How can that be?
Well, because their way of thinking is, I have something in my nose, it needs to come out. They're very black and white thinkers, and so what we see as socially inappropriate, they're not aware that it's socially inappropriate. Again, that's where we have to go in and teach them some of those socially appropriate behaviors.
So could it be that they don't really notice what people are thinking about them?
They don't notice at all. They're not aware. They don't care what other people think about them. Because again, it's just about they're living in this bubble, in this black and white world, and they're not aware of what's out there. They're not making eye contact. They don't know your name. They don't want to know.
So if I as a parent, the educator, look at the child who's picking his nose and say, don't you realize what people are going to think of you? Does that work?
No, he's not going to know. He doesn't understand that. That's that social thinking that they're not aware of at all. And so they're not aware of social, concepts that are the things that we are taught, So, and even if we teach them through time some of those to be socially aware, they still don't understand or get it. They will perform if we teach them, like, to make that eye contact, or I don't pick my nose, but they still are like, that doesn't make sense. You have an itch, you have something in your nose, why don't you get rid of it?
It may never bother them whether or not they pick their nose in public, but they can learn over time potentially to not do it, but not really know why.
Right.
Okay. Now, some children I know when I work with kids in the clinic, and this is, I'm sure you're aware, is that when they have an area of interest and they're not just casually interested in it, and this is a characteristic of autism, when they become obsessed with or stuck on or perseverate, as they say, they get stuck on a certain interest. How can that play out, and can you kind of give me an example again from your experience, what kind of things a child with autism might get stuck on and what it looks like?
Well, like we were discussing before, it could be vacuum cleaners. I met ones who really loved washers. Trains is a big one. Airplanes is another one. And they'll get fixated and know everything about every type of train, airplane, vacuum cleaner. And they will just talk about it and talk about it and talk about it.
So the difference between a person with autism and a person without autism, a lot of people may show an interest in airplanes or trains. I mean, there's a train museum in Jamestown, and there's
Right.
docents over there, they love trains. And what makes it different for a child with autism versus a non-autistic individual when it comes to an interest like that?
Because they know everything. Like, so let's use, the Jamestown, Railtown.
Railtown,
Railtown. And so I have one little boy, he's 10 years old, and he can tell you every train that's been through Railtown, what year it is, if they've upgraded it, where it's been before. They know what the conductors are, what they say per line. They can actually be one of the tour guides. They will know everything about that place, like who's worked there, who hasn't worked there, the books that they can, everything about if they love Railtown. If they just love a train, they'll know everything, all the different trains that Railtown has, when they received them, and what they've done to them. What times they're ran, and everything.
So you're talking about kind of the intensity of what they understand about the thing and the fact that it's factual knowledge. I understand sometimes they have trouble relating that. So again, kind of to give us a flavor of what that means, to have that kind of an interest, how does it create a problem for them in public or in the family or something like that? When does that level of intensity, how does that create a behavior problem or a problem in interacting with other people?
Because when you go as a family outing to go and just ride the train, they will actually get up and conduct, and they will hold a tour, and they will inform everybody, regardless if they want to listen or not. They will let everybody know what's happening, what's going on, what they know, and it's not a family trip. It's just about them. And they have to make sure that they get it all out. And so if you try and stop them in the midst of, having a conversation about something that they really love, which is trains, or trying to say, it's over, it's time to go home, you're going to run into a huge amount of problems of yelling, screaming, I'm not done, I have to finish, and what I'm talking about, and what about this, and what about that? They want to know. Even though the people are not wanting to know all of this information, they will continue to just
So again,
go on.
kind of bringing it back to the why it makes them different. How come they don't know that people are no longer interested in what they're talking about?
Because they're not socially aware. They're not aware of facial expressions or emotions of other people. They have no clue. They don't know how to read other people, their faces or anything, or their body language. And when a person says, well, I'm not interested, or I've got to go, they don't even understand that because they're not done. And so it's like, no, you can leave once I've finished my tour, and so.
So we all put out these social signals, but for them, they don't see the signals.
They don't understand.
And even if they do see the signal, even if you told them directly, okay, I don't want to hear about trains anymore, do you think that's difficult for them to stop them?
Absolutely. So they have to finish to where they're ready to walk away and be done with it.
To when they're finally comfortable with it.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've done telling you my knowledge.
So if a child is defiant, so say I've asked this young man is interested in trains, and it's time to leave because it's 10:30 and we need to go and we need to be at Grandma's house by 10:45, and we're at the train museum in Railtown. Is he capable of saying, is it hard to make that transition for him then to say, okay, let's go?
Transitions are very hard for autistic children. That is one of the characteristics that you will run into is that they can't transition until they're ready or completely done with an activity. So transitional warnings are very important to have with these types of children.
So a transitional warning, what's that mean?
A transitional warning is where, and we can give it to other children as well, is that, you know, you have 5 minutes, you know, until we move on to the next activity or we're leaving. How long do we have? And it's really important a lot of times with these, that I've learned with working with these children, is that they repeat back to you the 5 minutes. You know, and then you have a 3-minute warning, and then you have, you know, a 1-minute warning, and so so when you say you have 1-minute warning, you say how long do you have, and they'll go 1 minute, and so that way you know they're getting
that they've heard it.
Yeah, they've heard it, and that you're able to transition.
I'm going to bet that a parent would listen to that and say, well, I shouldn't have to do that. I don't, you know, the child should just listen when it's time to go. I don't always have a time to spell it out to them that I have a 5-minute warning and a 3-minute warning. So I'm not going to do it because I don't think I should have to. What might happen in that circumstance?
Well, then you're going to get into a huge amount of behaviors to where you're going to have yelling, screaming. They're not going to leave. You're going to have to pull them, carry them out, and you know, so it's their option what they would like to have some transitional warnings where it's a little smooth of a, you know, exit, or you can have a dramatic exit. So, you know, and it'll be dramatic because if they're not ready to leave, they don't want to leave.
So then for the autistic individual, when they don't get that transitional warning, I know I've talked with parents before, it's more of like an assault on their senses, that you're committing a sin to try to drag them away from Railtown at the wrong time. So if a parent doesn't realize that, then they're making the child feel like they're committing a sin, and they react really strongly to that. So I understand that sometimes it's a trick getting that through, because not all parents will see that alike.
Right.
So do you oftentimes see a difference from if you have a 2-parent family and they're both parenting the kids? Do you see differences oftentimes between mother and father?
98% of the time.
98% of the time? You're kidding, they're different? That was really
Everybody's
amazing.
different. Yeah, 98% of the time, yeah, the parents aren't parenting, are on the same page, and there's just an understanding. So
what kind of differences do you usually see between parents?
the differences I see between parents are, like you said, we shouldn't have to give them that warning. They should listen when we ask them to. They should be able to sit down and have dinner. They should be able to get in the car when I ask them to. Why can't they, go and play outside by them, with other kids? It's just a lack of understanding that how we, if you have an autistic child, how we were raised not being autistic is very different. And so it's a whole new parenting technique in raising these types of children.
And those are the kind of tools you can give parents by explaining that to them?
Yeah.
That's terrific. Okay.
Yeah.
So sometimes kids with autism are known to be aggressive, which means I had a child in the office last week who was, whenever the mother wasn't paying attention to him or his immediate needs weren't met in the way he wanted them met,
Right.
he would reach up and yank on her hair and pull her hair down, and then pull her head down, and she would you'd see her head continue to do this because she continued to allow him to do that. So sometimes you see kids being aggressive like that, and in ordinary kids, that would be, for the most part, it'd be kind of surprising. I mean, most kids wouldn't do that under ordinary circumstances, but it seems like autistic kids can be more aggressive. Tell me about why that might happen.
They're more aggressive because they've been reinforced in the past that if I perform this certain behavior, I will get a response. I will get a faster response versus saying, "Mom, mom, mom, look, look, look," or they don't. If a mom doesn't respond to that, and a kid will then go and say, "Well, what can I do to get them to respond?" Which could be hitting, pulling, pulling on hair, and then a parent will immediately, because it's happening to them, respond to that, and so therefore they know, oh, I just have to pull the hair, and then mom will respond. I'll get my needs met. And
So what you're saying is sometimes the way the parent responds actually can make the behavior worse. So it's something that they learn.
yeah, they learn through time that if I just call mom, or if I just, and I get no response, I go over there and I tap her or pull on her or something like that, or go, mom, mom, get right in her face. She doesn't respond how I want her to. But if I pull her hair, she immediately responds to that behavior. They've just learned, oh, let me pull the hair. I can get mom to respond faster to me.
So I guess other kids potentially could do that, but it seems like autistic kids do that more often. Do they have more difficulty getting their needs met to begin with?
That's a good question. I guess it depends on each household. Each household's different. So some, yeah, because the parent is tired, and so they're not going to, the parent is tired, they've worked all day, or they've dealt with these behaviors like 20 million times, and by 5 o'clock, you just want to be done. It's very frustrating and, and exhausting, because the autistic child wants to perform or wants to do the same thing over and over and over and talk about the same things over and over and over again. And so, therefore, yeah.
No, I think that can be. I mean, part of what I see sometimes
sense?
as a parent is, they're so tired of acting as a parent in a way which is not really natural,
Right.
because their child is not giving them the same kind of endearing, bonding, feedback sort of thing. It seems like autistic kids are going to be more prone to looking to get their needs met in ways which are more blunt,
Right.
and they're not very good at being clever and manipulative.
Well, and they might have been nonverbal for a long time. And so if they were nonverbal for years and then started talking at a later age than normal, yeah, all their, forms of communication was through pulling hair, tugging, pointing, that kind of stuff. And so, if they were, that's how they're going to learn some of those behaviors and always go back to them, even if we try and teach them not to do it, because
Right.
we're going to get a faster response from their parent.
So sometimes the ability also, when a child under normal circumstances say thanks, they snuggle with the parent, they give hugs, they show appreciation for things like that. Is that a problem for a child with autism?
It depends on the child, because I know some children, autistic children, 100% autistic, but they are so affectionate. And they're just all over their moms, hugging and kissing and doing all of that. And I think it's because that parent had worked on them very young to be very affectionate. And then some are just, no, don't touch me, I'm going to cry, scream, leave me alone. And they're not affectionate at all.
So they're conditioned by the way they're raised early on.
I think so, yeah.
So it can be, yeah.
Yeah, I think if you start real young, it just,
And again,
doesn't matter if you're autistic, I'm going to hug and squeeze you and, kiss on you and all kinds of stuff. So I know some who are really affectionate and some who are like,
So again,
don't touch
sometimes
me.
depends on the kid.
Right.
So obviously
Right.
a lot of times in the autistic community, autism community, they talk about if you know one child with autism, you know one child with autism, which means there's this range of what you would consider normal or typical for a child with autism. So I'm sure that bonding is one of those sort of things.
Right.
One of the things we frequently run into also is food behaviors. So children with autism oftentimes are picky eaters, but their pickiness is somewhat different than other kids with other
Right.
individuals. Why is that?
I don't know why that is. It just is. And some of them, maybe it starts at a young age or something, and, a parent introduces a certain types of food, maybe, and so they get fixated on that food, and then that's all they want, and so then the child is really good at saying, I'm not going to eat, unless I have that type of food. which is typically McDonald's and nuggets.
Yeah, chicken nuggets. I know it's the favorite.
Chicken nuggets is the favorite.
String cheese, chicken nuggets, and pizza with nothing on
pizza.
it.
Yeah, with no sauce.
Right.
Yeah, no cheese.
Right.
Pizza.
It's pizza.
Which is bread. So.
Right. So they get fixated on things like that.
Yeah, they get fixated on stuff like that. And each child is different. So the children that have, come into my life, some have a little bit of an array of food, and then some, I couldn't get them to eat nothing but pizza. And sometimes they wouldn't eat that because that day they wanted only bean burritos. And so it was like, because it also depended on the day too and what they were craving that day.
So it's not always reliable that way either.
Yeah, it's not always reliable that way. But there's ways that you can get them to start incorporating some vegetables and salad and that kind of stuff. So
I hear the term meltdown used a lot by parents, that my child had a meltdown yesterday or today or last week, or they're planning on them. They know they're going to have a meltdown later today. What is a meltdown, and how does that relate to a child with autism?
Well, and that's a good question. And so if someone came to me as a behaviorist, I'm like, you need to define what a meltdown is to me. And so I don't know, to me, a meltdown is, I didn't have coffee that morning, so I'm going to have a meltdown, which means I'm going to be grumpy. But, a meltdown could be, biting, hitting, kicking, or a meltdown could just be I'm going to be on the floor and I'm going to be screaming and yelling. So I'll need them to really define, what a meltdown is. And so once they've defined what that meltdown entails, then we could probably, get to the bottom of it. But
and getting to the bottom of it, so how do you get to the bottom of a meltdown?
By really asking a lot of questions. And so when a parent, comes to a behaviorist, we're going to ask you a ton of questions about, what's going on in your life, what's happening, what do you mean by meltdown? What time does it happen? All of that kind of stuff. We really want to know what's going on, because that would help us be able to find out what the function of that meltdown is. Because as behaviorists, we believe, behaviors speak louder than words, and so at least I do. And so to me, the behaviors are speaking to me, are telling me something, what's going on, and so that's getting to the bottom of it.
Okay. So we don't expect kids to be perfect. We don't expect children with autism to
We're
be
not
perfect.
perfect, right?
So as a behaviorist, what's your goal for the child?
My goal when someone comes in to see me is like, what are your two major issues that are going on? I just want two. And my goal would be to try and work on those two major issues. And so sometimes would be eating a variety of foods. Sometimes I just want them to go to bed at a certain time. I just want them to, not hit me anymore, or communicate, or so it just depends on what they're coming in to see me about and what that goal would be.
So then you don't try to fix everything all at once.
No.
So you try to do it, and so we'd call it an increment. So you'd say, we're going to focus on these two behaviors now, and then potentially they can come back for basically round two and do a second set of behaviors, maybe, if they want to look at that.
Right, but typically what happens is if you pick the top two behaviors that are occurring that's really bothering, it's just like recently, I had a parent come in and she's all like, I'm tired of the hitting. I'm tired of it.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, so let's focus on the hitting.
Okay, and we're going to have to talk about this in the next session. We're going to talk, next time we're going to be talking about what kind of things behaviors can do to help and how to end those behaviors.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
All right, thank you.
Okay.